Hi, this is Randall Schwartz, host of Floss Weekly. This week, Guillermo Amaral joins me. We're going to be talking about a book publishing system called Booktype that lets you go all the way from source to having a PDF that you can use with a printer. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Floss Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Floss Weekly with Randall Schwartz and Guillermo Amaral. Episode 371, recorded January 19th, 2016. Booktype. This episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Drobo, a family of safe and expandable yet simple-to-use storage arrays. Drobos are designed to protect your important data forever. Visit drobo.com/twit and use the code TWIT100 to save $100 off a Drobo Mini, Drobo 4-Bay, and Drobo 5N. And by DigitalOcean, simple and fast cloud hosting built for developers. Deploy an SSD cloud server in 55 seconds. Try it today for free. Visit DigitalOcean.com, and once you sign up, be sure to enter the promo code FLOSS in the billing section to get your $10 credit. It's time for Floss Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randall Schwartz, Merlin at StoneEdge.com, bringing you each week the movers, the shakers, the big projects, the little projects, projects you may be using every day and not aware of it, projects you may want to go download right after this show and go play with, but not until you get home. If you're listening to this in the car, please don't do it while you're in the car, okay? Unless you have really good portable Wi-Fi. Joining me this week is my good friend, Guillermo Amaral. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Randall, how's it going?
Hey, and I when I was trying to figure out a co-host for this show, I didn't realize that you had also done last week's show. So thank you for the double timer there. So we appreciate that. And
no problem. I don't have that much to do, so
I've got way more than I have to do.
Yeah.
And where are you speaking to us from? The usual place?
Yeah, it's just same bunker right now.
Okay.
Yeah, no real change.
Your second floor bunker, which is always cool.
Yeah,
your second floor underground bunker, which just doesn't make any sense. And for those of you watching the video, I am also in my apartment in very rainy and luckily big gray sky. We love the gray sky because there's no sun coming in and annoying me. So I'm in Beaverton, Oregon, home after a 2-week cruise, which is why I haven't been on the last couple weeks. I will save some more information about that at the end of the show because it's really sort of distracting. We really want to get to the main part of the show here. So this week's show is about Booktype, and Booktype is a publishing system that lets you manage content that's going to go into a book, and then edit and collaborate and rearrange and do all that sort of stuff. The things you would typically do to produce a book. And then the nice thing is it has, I think what I saw in the video, 5 different output formats. So like a print PDF, a screen PDF. Even XHTML, so that you could essentially add some style sheet to it and do it directly as an HTML page. But then also the Mobi and EPUB formats. It wasn't Mob. I'm missing a letter there somewhere. And pretty interesting stuff. The project's still fairly young, but getting a lot of traction. A lot of companies and stuff are using it. And it looks like there's both a community edition and a much more interesting commercial edition with hosting being provided by them. So the company that's behind this. What do you know so far about this besides that? Because that was the elevator pitch.
Well, I didn't know much about it, and I have been looking for some things. Since I keep trying to write a book, but I keep getting distracted with work and stuff. But yeah, I was looking for something to write, something like to help me write a book with a few friends. So in this case, I guess this would really work out well. In fact, I played with it last week. I think when we got the info on the next episode we were gonna do, right?
Right.
And the pro version seems like really feature filled, but I didn't get a chance to play with the community edition. So I'm not sure what's missing there. I'm sure our guests will be able to clear that up for us.
Oh yeah, well I know, and I didn't mention the guest name yet. Obviously, after I don't do this show for 4 weeks, I forget everything I'm supposed to do. So we have with us today Daniel James, who's going to be talking to us about Booktype, and he's apparently a consultant and contributor to the project since 2012. So he has a lot more experience than either of us combined. It's just like me 2 hours, a few hours. So we will bring him on in just a second, but I have an important announcement before we do that. So it turns out that digital data is an essential part of our lives. For all your storage needs, Drobo is a simple, safe, and expandable solution. They offer a complete line of external storage arrays, which you can order and preloaded with drives or add your own. The Drobo's 5N is perfect for network-attached storage as a media server, file server, or backup solution. And it's easy to use. Just plug it into your switch or router, and you're ready to go. Apps let you back up data to 2 different cloud service providers or sync via BitTorrent Sync. It includes a quad-core ARM processor. 3 of those cores are available to run Linux, so that's kind of cool. Tools for developers include a full LAMP stack, Node.js, and WordPress. It also supports C, C++, Go, Perl, Perl, Python, and Ruby, as well as Git to host your own repo. Drobos are reliable. The data received by your Drobo and not yet written to disk is protected if there's a sudden power loss. Even better, Drobos have an internal eUSB device where the data is copied if there's a power failure and protects against long outages. It's expandable. Expand or replace storage in your Drobo with ease. No tools required. The Beyond RAID technology lets you expand on the fly and mix and match drives. It's simple, easy to read, colored lights on the front of the Drobo to communicate status. And it's fast. It supports Thunderbolt, Gigabit, and USB 3.0 connections. The connections vary per model. The SSD hot cache accelerates the database in small file reads, and it's also great for reading HD and large media files. I myself am a Drobo user. I've had the 4-bay FireWire drive for quite a bit of time, and I think before that I had the 3-bay or 4-bay USB-only drive, and I really love it. It's running 24/7 here in my house, and I access it remotely over the net to be able to pick up my files while I'm on the road, which is most of the time. So visit drobo.com/twit to learn more and check out their complete line of products. Also, when you use the code TWIT100, that's all capital TWIT100, you save $100 off the purchase of a Drobo Mini, Drobo 4-bay, or Drobo 5N. That's drobo.com/twit and use the code TWIT100. We thank Drobo for their support of Floss Weekly. And now let's go ahead and bring on our guest. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Well, hello, and thank you very much for having me.
Great. And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm speaking to you from the Isle of Wight, which is an island off the south coast of England.
I think I've been just around there. I was by the Isle of Man. Is anywhere close?
We're at the other end of the country, but yeah, people often mix those two up.
Well, you know, they have all those different layers of England and UK and the British Isles and what is the Isle of Wight? How does it relate to everything else? I remember seeing a video on that.
We're part of England. Yeah.
Okay.
We're part of England. The Isle of Man is a bit different. It's got its own status, but no, we're only a few miles from the mainland. So.
Oh, okay. Are you over by that Sealand platform?
Not quite, no. We're a bit around the corner from there, but yeah, we're in the English Channel between England and France. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, now you know my entire geography of England. Yeah. It's not very extensive. So I only know when they get on the cruise ship, they say, "Well, we're stopping tomorrow in this port." That's the only thing I know. So it's good. At least I'm not driving the ship. I think I'd be in real trouble. Anyway, it's not about geography. This is not This Week in Geography. It's about today Booktype. Can you give us the 30,000-foot view by at least starting by telling us what problem this is solving?
Well, there are many content management systems out there, obviously, but Booktype is specialized for making books. So if you think of like a web page and a book page being basically equivalent, the idea is that we have a content management system that's written in Python. It's actually a Django project. And we have all the usual things that you would have in a content management system, like, you have users and you have logins and you have social features so you can see who else is logged in with you. But instead of working on producing a website, you're working on producing a book. And the two are very closely related because the native format of the book chapters is HTML. But what we do is we try to make it output agnostic. So you might want, output for a website. You might want output for an EPUB, like for a, digital book. You might want PDF to go to a printing press, screen PDF as an attachment on your website. And XML for something like Adobe InDesign. And the idea is that, if you can convert HTML into that, we can potentially support that as an output format.
That's an interesting strategy, but as you look at HTML, it's really only a subset of what you'd want in a printed book. Are there ways to add sort of more complex layout things that are coded by single codings so I can type quickly, or am I always stuck with just the HTML elements?
Well, the handy thing is that in the CSS3, we have this thing called the paged media specification, which is designed for printing from browsers. So you can define the size of the sheet of paper that your PDF will be represented on. And you can define other things like, for example, printers need crop marks around the edges so that they can align the paper. So we can add those. And so what you get out of the end of the process is a PDF that looks, we hope, as good as anything you would get from a conventional publishing system.
Okay. And so how did this project get started? Who started it and why?
So the origin of the project goes back to a project called FLOSS Manuals, which is a documentation volunteer project for all kinds of free software. And they had, sort of wikis and things like that for putting books together. But they found that they didn't really have a tool that was specialized enough. So they developed a tool called Booktype, and that eventually became Booktype. And so it's always been like a Django application in its sort of, Booktype form. And we recently released Booktype 2.0 late last year.
And how did you get involved with the project?
Well, I've been working with Source Fabric, which is the sort of organization that sponsors Booktype development, for about 5 years now. It's a European-based nonprofit that develops open source for journalism. So, like newsrooms, newspapers, that kind of thing. And we actually started using Booktype when we were working with FLOSS Manuals to document our own software. So we went from there to invest in the software itself and, give it a life of its own as a product. So that's where the sort of, commercial services come in.
So the core setup is, you said there was a Django and there must be some sort of database there?
Yeah, you can use whatever you want in theory, but we recommend Postgres.
Yay.
For the, you can use SQLite if you want for testing purposes, but yeah, production users are on Postgres. Then you've got your conventional stack, so you have like Apache or Nginx to serve the user interface. And then behind the scenes, you can have your various conversion tools. So for example, the thing I've been working on most lately is MPDF, which is a PHP-based HTML to PDF converter with a lot of features for internationalization. So for example, it supports Arabic and right-to-left scripts, which like most PDF rendering engines don't. So if you imagine that like your typical user of a browser-based PDF, they're going to be printing off, like an email or like a simple web page for reference. And they're not really too concerned about like the nitty-gritty of the, the typography and things like that. But MPDF is designed like from the ground up for producing books. So it has all of those like features like crop marks and all that internationalization I mentioned, which is very important in our work because we support like publishing in lots of different languages. So yeah, that's like the output that I've been working on most recently. But as I said, it's output agnostic, and we're actually looking at adding support for LaTeX at the moment. So
wow.
because there are other similar book producing systems out there. Some of them tend to be authoring in HTML, like, for example, Pressbooks, which is based on WordPress. Or you've got others that are based on LaTeX. So the idea of, putting a book together in a browser isn't like unique to Booktype, but I think Booktype and Pressbooks are the main two that are fully open source. You can just go and download and, get a full version. Many of them are like what I would call a closed cloud service. So it's based on free software, but as a user, you don't get to see that because it's all behind the scenes.
We had a question from the chat room that is not directly appropriate to this, but since you just talked about translation, Aniki actually asked, where can you get a German book translated to English? But I don't think that's related to this. What I'm more curious about is the flow process. Can I simultaneously have like a German person translating stuff as it's getting written in English? How does that work?
Well, we don't have that feature in Booktype, but you can clone a book and translate it inside Booktype. That's probably the easiest way to do it at the moment. But for Actual book translation, we don't have a specific feature for that at the moment.
Okay. And so what is the interface? What am I looking at? Am I using a browser-based editor to be updating the data? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so when you go to your Booktype instance, which would be running on your server, you would log in like in the normal way, and you have a dashboard which shows all of your books that you're working on, books you've previously created, and so on. And when you go into one of those books and you go into the table of contents, which list all the chapters, you can click on a chapter and edit it, and that comes up in an Aloha window, which is, if you're familiar with it, it's an inline web page editor. So instead of having Tiny MCE, for example, where you have the text in one area and you have a box beneath it and you edit the text and you click update or whatever and it updates, with Aloha you type directly into the web page that you're editing. So there's no separation between sort of presentation and editing, which means you get this sort of pseudo WYSIWYG environment.
Yeah, I see other projects that sort of do that as well. Is Aloha something you guys created, or are you leveraging somebody else's stuff?
That's somebody else's open source project. We have made some improvements to it, specifically in the area of things like track changes. So if you're used to writing a book in Word, you would have a feature that enabled you to sort of select a bit of text and change it, and then it would be shown as a change to your fellow editors. So what we did is we took the ice.js plugin, which was written by the New York Times and open sourced, and we integrated it with Aloha so that you can have the in-page editing, but you can have the strike-through text and the highlighted text to show what's been changed since the last revision. And we also mark that up with spans so that you can have a tooltip that says, this particular text was added by this user at this timestamp. So that's that's one contribution we've made to Aloha.
Is that real-time visible, or do you have to wait and reload your page to see other people's changes?
Well, the way that it works in Booktype is we actually lock people out of chapters, and there's a good reason for this. If you imagine a Google Doc, and you're working on it with several other people, you might be changing something up on page 1 of the doc, and somebody else is changing something on page 3, and that's really good for fast collaboration. But the problem is in a book context, because once a book is published, it can't really be unpublished, and people have to take responsibility for signing off a certain chapter. So you can't have the situation where you got to the last part of the chapter, you could, okay, I'm fine with that, and it says it's saved, fine, and you don't realize that somebody else has changed something that you don't agree with, or you wouldn't have signed off, right? So the way it works in Booktype is you take responsibility for a revision, so it's a bit like Git in that way, and when you save it, you can save it with a comment for your fellow editors. And while you're working on it, the others are locked out of that particular chapter. So the idea is you go into your chapter, you make your change, you comment, you save, and then it's in a sort of history log, much like a Git log.
I had a little free time last week, so I played around with I think this was the Pro version, since I went to the .org site, but I sent to the Pro version. I'm not really sure. Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, I was gonna ask, are there any main differences between both of them? That
No. We have a sort of Booktype Pro, which is a brand name for a managed hosting service, but the code as you see it on GitHub is what we use for that. The only difference is that if you're got a big project and we're providing services to that project, we'll probably do some customizations, but it'll be very user specific stuff. So any improvements that we make to Booktype as a whole will go back to GitHub. The kind of stuff that's custom tends to be a publisher has a house font that they want to use for every book, and so we'll put that on the Booktype instance, but it wouldn't necessarily be part of the open source GitHub release, because a lot of book fonts aren't actually open source, right? And they're not redistributable. And one of the interesting things we've run into with this is that a lot of the book trades fonts are not actually very good when it comes to things like internationalization. Actually, the open source fonts like Deja Vu Sans, for example, are far ahead. I mean, we've just been working with Vietnamese text, which is based on French typography, but with combining accents. So you can have like 2 accents on the same letter, and very few proprietary fonts actually support those characters, like the book trade would use. But yeah, Deja Vu Sans is very good for that.
You know, I was wondering. I have played around with fonts and font licenses before with my graphics design background. So yeah, I do know it kind of gets a little flaky, especially if you are using the license in the server, and then maybe more people start using that, how that might work. But I'm guessing you guys take care of all that licensing bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, like most of our larger users, they actually have a direct relationship with the font foundry, so they will have like a specific variant of the font that's like theirs, and that they've paid a lot of money for. But you know, for an open source user, you've got actually a ton of really good fonts out there that you can use for you know, PDF generation and things like that, and they look as good as anything. So yeah.
And you mentioned self-hosting versus, in this case, what you guys offer, the pro hosting service. How hard would it be for somebody to actually get, let's say, their own self-hosted version installed?
Well, I just wrote a tutorial for DigitalOcean about how to install Booktype on Debian Jessie, you know, Debian 8. And that's pretty like step-by-step. For like the more technical user, we recommend that they install from Git repository because it's easier to follow for updates. And you can, you know, update it every day if you want. We also have a Debian package, which has been tested on Debian Jessie and like the latest Ubuntu LTS. And that does tend to lag a little behind the Git repository because, you know, we're adding stuff to the Git repo all the time. But yeah, I mean, it's fairly step-by-step sort of CMS installation. We don't have like a super easy wizard or anything like that for the Git installers because we figure that, you know, they're technical enough to, you know, use the command line. But the Deb package does prompt you for questions like, you know, what's the name of your database? You know, which host is it on and things like that. So we hope that makes the installation easier.
How much power would it actually require? I'm guessing you couldn't run this on like a Raspberry Pi, right? You probably need like a dedicated server.
Well, that depends how fast you want it to work because, I mean, something like a book in Arabic or Chinese, you will find that the rendering actually takes a lot longer to PDF than it does for Latin text. And that's because, you know, the complexity of the font and all the extra sort of rules that go with that. So, I mean, like I run instances on my desktop machine using like VirtualBox or something like that for testing. And, it'll go. It's not particularly resource hungry. But if you want to deploy it in production, you will need a decent amount of RAM and, you know, all the usual web server sort of hardware to, you know, just to cope with the load of people hitting that site and, you know, downloading. I mean, one of the things about book production is that the files are relatively small. So if you're used to like working with audio or video, I mean, some of these PDFs we can, you know, are only maybe a couple of megabytes. So the actual, relative to other kinds of projects that I've worked on, you can get away with a relatively low configuration. But I'd say you'd want at least sort of 2 gigabytes of RAM on your web server instance for a, you know, if you were actually going to use it properly.
You mentioned VirtualBox. Is there an easily downloadable version, I guess, image available already?
We don't have like a ready-made image. We do have someone in our community who's working on a Docker image for it because it's, you know, it's a server-side application, so that kind of lends itself to that. But, you know, you can install a regular Debian on VirtualBox or Ubuntu and, you know, follow our instructions for those platforms.
All right. And you mentioned Linux, and in this case, I guess more Linux. Is there other support? Yeah. Are you supporting, let's say, Mac OS or FreeBSD?
Not FreeBSD that I recall, but we have had users install on a Mac. I mean, if you're familiar enough with Django and Python, that you can do like homebrew and things like that to install some of the like the dependencies, then yeah, in theory it's possible. But you know, there's no strong reason to install it on a Mac because it's a server-side application. So, you know, I mean, for testing, yeah, sure, or you know, just trying it out, that kind of thing. But in production, you'd almost certainly be putting it in a data center somewhere for, you know, for access to your, you know, your remote users.
Okay, well, we have a question from the chat room. Emily the Strange is asking, Is this running as a system daemon? My guess would be no.
No, not really. I mean, there are daemons underneath it. So, for example, we use Celery as a sort of like to run sort of worker processes. So, in case your sort of system starts to flake out or whatever, it will restart it. With like Supervisor D, for example, we've used. But there are different ways to install it. And one of the things about the Docker project is that they're actually going down a slightly different route to restart the services. But you can think of it just like a regular content management system. So you have your web server like Apache, you have your database, and you have your Python application in this case.
Is the Apache the only web server supported right now, or might you have something like a light HTTPD or something?
I mean, we document for Apache because that's what most people are used to. But I mean, in theory, it can run on anything that will work with Django, right? So Nginx, for example.
Okay. So the Django, right? So I'm guessing it's Python. That wouldn't be then you wouldn't really have a hard limit on what OS you could port this to, right?
Right, in theory, but like I said, I mean, for practical reasons, like that's what's in the typical data center, right? So, and we're all, like free software people, so, we'll be using GNU Linux anyway. But in theory, you could, it should be like platform neutral, as platform neutral as Python is. I think some of the, the sort of details of like system configuration and so on might be a bit GNU Linux specific in our documentation. But yeah, we welcome any input from people who want to run it on other platforms.
You did mention that you could, I guess you do the backend uses HTML, right? Could you be able to, bypass the WYSIWYG editor and just start writing your book in HTML?
There is a like an edit raw HTML mode in the editor. So like if you have, typically this happens because somebody copies and pastes in some text or something like that, and it's got a load of like garbage tags in it. And then they have to go into the raw HTML editor and, fix those manually. That's, but I mean, the Aloha editor is very easy to use, so you don't really gain very much by writing in raw HTML unless you particularly enjoy that.
I'm guessing a lot of people do. I wouldn't personally do it for a book, but it does kind of turn into something fun at a few moments here. Well, let's say, would you actually be able to contribute to this project? You said you had a GitHub repository, right? Yeah. Are you taking? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say github.com/sourcefabric. You'll find the Booktype and the various other SourceFabric projects there. And we also have github.com/Booktype, which is all of the kind of side projects, like our MPDF tests and, packaging groups and things like that.
Yeah, I know we've got a lot more questions to ask, but my ears actually perked up when you said DigitalOcean because they happen to be one of the sponsors of this show. Let me talk a little bit about them, and we'll go back to asking questions here. So whether you're developing an app, a website, or working on a server-based project, you need flexible, reliable, and affordable hosting. DigitalOcean offers Droplets, which are virtual private servers that can be customized and deployed easily to host websites. Web apps, production applications, personal projects, virtual desktops, and almost anything else you can think of with full root access. This helps you get your project off the ground, quickly, and makes it easy to scale when you find success. DigitalOcean is used by over 600,000 developers, including me. I use it to run a small FreeBSD package building system, and it's been really fun to play with. Deploy and configure your Droplets via streamlined control panel or simple API. Choose your OS, Ubuntu, CentOS, Debian, Fedora, CoreOS, and FreeBSD. And that's actually why I got on DigitalOcean, because they finally offered a FreeBSD hosted solution. Select from one of the many pre-configured one-clicks like Drupal, Docker, or Node.js to get up and running quickly, or build the exact infrastructure you need with root access to servers running 100% SSDs in state-of-the-art data centers around the world. It was highly scalable to meet the demands of a rapidly growing application or business. You can also use advanced features like floating IPs for high availability, private networking, and automated deployments via API. It's extremely active community with a large and detailed set of tutorials, of which you have one of them there, on the ways you can use your Droplet. Want to configure a LAMP server, set up a virtual desktop or VPN? They got you covered. And it's so easy to get started, you can deploy an SSD cloud server in as little as 55 seconds. DigitalOcean has incredibly affordable and straightforward pricing. Servers start at only $5 per month. There's also hourly pricing available starting at less than a penny per hour. But we're going to make it so you can get started today and deploy an SSD cloud server for free. Visit DigitalOcean.com and create the account. Once you confirm your email and account information, go to the billing section and enter the promo code FLOSS, F-L-O-S-S, for a free $10 credit. That's plenty to get started and explore what DigitalOcean can do. That's DigitalOcean.com. And once you sign up, enter the code FLOSS in the billing section to get your $10 credit for free. And by the way, congrats to DigitalOcean. They just launched their 10 millionth droplet. And we thank DigitalOcean for their sponsorship of this show. Okay, now let's go back to a few more questions here. What is dynamic publishing, and why don't we hear much about it?
So dynamic publishing is like a trend in the publishing industry. I mean, it's sometimes called XML first publishing, or like, less often HTML first publishing. And what it basically means is that the processes of the publishing system are automated. So in a typical like publishing company, you'll have people writing like manuscripts in Microsoft Word, something like that, passing lots of files back and forth. And there's a lot of latency between the time that the person finishes like drafting the book and the actual book is produced, because there's still a lot of manual conversion and checking and so on. So for example, I wrote a book a few years ago, and the publisher had everything based on Word. So I sent off my Word file. I might get it back like the next day with corrections and changes, right? So once you have many chapters in the mix, that becomes very, very slow. Mm-hmm. So the idea in a dynamic publishing system is that like at any time, you can just press a button and you will get like a PDF of the current state of the book. So the reason we don't hear much about it is because it's mostly in the corporate world. So if you have like a very large like company and they have produced a lot of documentation or like technical material, they will have some sort of proprietary XML first workflow, which they've spent a great deal of time and money on. But there's nothing really there for the sort of average or like small publisher, except for the open source stuff, because the big players don't really operate in the sort of small publisher world yet. So we're bringing dynamic publishing to like many more people by using open source.
Okay, and I'm not, again, familiar with this process very well, because with O'Reilly, I was just writing stuff in our magical pod, which is the Perl online documentation format with a few extensions. Right. And so I was basically editing a plain text file. But apparently for the update of Learning Perl 7th edition, which is crazy. I mean, 7 editions of that book, one of the best-selling books on Perl in the world. They're having us hook up with something I think called Atlas. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. Yes, Atlas is a dynamic publishing system, but it's like an in-house O'Reilly system, and so it's mostly designed for O'Reilly authors and O'Reilly partners. And as far as I know, there's no release of Atlas. I mean, it's obviously something we've followed very closely, and in the past we've like held Booktype workshops with like people from O'Reilly and the Tools of Change conference that they used to run. So yeah, we're both familiar with each other's work, I think, but. Booktype is up there on GitHub for anybody who wants to use it.
So who are you competing with? What else is out here in this space?
I wouldn't say we really have any competitors. I mean, I mentioned Pressbooks, which is based on WordPress, but that is like aimed at the sort of fairly straightforward book, I would say, and the general author. So like people writing their novel or something like that, which is, of course, is a big market. I mean, our projects tend to be a bit more bespoke and specialized. So we're doing like, more complex layouts. We're doing complex book structures, multiple language editions simultaneously, and things of that nature. But yeah, there's plenty of room in the sort of dynamic publishing market for like open source players, because we're a relatively small organization. We can possibly support every publisher in the world. So we really welcome the collaboration with other developers, as we're often using similar tools like MPDF, for example. And there's it's quite early days, for example, for like writing themes for book publishing. So like in Drupal or WordPress or whatever, you have all of these themes you can quickly download and just implement a good looking website straight away. A lot of the stuff in the book publishing world is still quite custom. And one of the things we want to work towards is having a format for a book theme. So, you have a certain font, you have a certain layout for the front pages, you have certain margins, and, so you'd say, okay, I want to switch. I don't particularly like that style of book. I want this one. presets for things like, standard paper sizes available in different countries, because they do vary between like the, North America and the Europe, for example. So, that's, one thing we'd definitely be open to collaboration with other developers on, is the sort of the idea of theming for books.
Yeah, it's actually going to start to ask that. I don't remember the company name you mentioned, that's like who you work for and do that.
Yeah, Source Fabric, yeah.
Source Fabric, okay. So what's the relationship between Source Fabric and the body of people who are contributing to Booktype?
So Source Fabric, as mentioned, is a non-profit that's really focused on journalism. And, books are obviously related to that. For example, there's a newspaper in Brazil called Brazil 24/7. It's an online newspaper. And they're a Booktype user because they take their long-form journalism and they put it into books, which they then sell to their readership. So, like compilations and, series of articles and so on. So, that's a good example of the crossover between like book publishing and journalism. But what's happened, because Booktype is now moving into like other kinds of like non-journalism projects, we've spun off this Booktype company, which is, just like solely focused on Booktype. And that's based in Berlin in Germany.
Okay, then let me narrow the question, John, since now I understand the relationship. What is the relationship between the Booktype professional organization and Booktype, the project? Or is it one and the same, or? It
is pretty much one and the same, yeah. I mean, like, the key contributors to Booktype are all like employees of the Booktype company. But, we do get lots of smaller contributions from community members who might change like a file here and a file there, or contribute some documentation improvements, or like the Docker scripts, for example. So yeah, there's like a peripheral group of users who are interested in that, and we've got some more of those since the DigitalOcean tutorial was published. So I'd say we've got sort of a small group of core developers. And they tend to spend most of their time working on the client projects. So they will be customizing Booktype and, like implementing different layouts and structures and things like that. And workflows are a big part of it as well. Like, how do you smoothly get people who aren't used to using like an online tool to adapt to a dynamic workflow?
And then does the ownership of the say the roadmap for Booktype then belong to the professional organization?
You could say that, but then that's because most of the contributors work for it, But it's like I say, it's out there on GitHub. So if people want to take it in a new direction, and something we hadn't thought of, we're very open to that. As long as it's an improvement, we're all ears.
Cool. And is the bug tracker also on GitHub?
We do have some GitHub issues for like individual libraries and things like that you can file, and of course we accept pull requests as well. We have our own Source Fabric bug tracker, which is like dev.sourcefabric.org. So the way that it works is if you sign up for the Booktype forum with you get like a username and a password, and that also works for the bug tracker. So you can file issues there and follow through.
And if I start with, say, the hosted platform, and then I decide, I'm spending a lot of money here, and not making that much money yet. Can I do a full export dump and bring it into my self-hosted solution?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, obviously, you can get the database from us anytime, but the individual books themselves are also exportable. So, like one quite good export and import format is EPUB, because it's like a wrapper around a set of XHTML files, one per chapter. And what you can do is you can export an EPUB from any Booktype instance and import it into any other Booktype instance. So there's no sort of locking down the content or anything like that.
That would lose the change history, though, right?
Yes, that would, yeah. I mean, like if you needed to do like a full migration, then yeah, you'd take a database dump and, migrate that across. But yeah, we're not interested in locking up people's data, It's the most important thing is that they, improve their workflow.
That's awesome. Okay. And what's in the future? What's the biggest features you're missing right now? And if people want to contribute, where would they, what kinds of things would they have to know to be able to contribute?
Well, all kinds of open source contributors are very welcome. I mean, one very popular contribution from the community that's not especially technical is translation of interface strings, which we do on Transifex. So basically you get a list of strings in the interface, like, log in and, click here to create a new book and all those kind of strings. And you can translate that into lots of different languages. You just request a new language and start. So that's one very easy way to help Booktype. We welcome all kinds of Python contributions, and also on the PHP side as well for things like export scripts for MPDF. I mean, one particular feature we've been working on just recently with the MPDF community on GitHub is widows and orphans support. So you've probably seen a book where the like a few words are hanging on the end of a line, or go over into the next page, and this is considered bad form in book publishing, and usually it has to be tweaked and corrected manually. So what we're trying to do is get the sort of the setting of how many words you're prepared to allow, or how many lines you're prepared to allow to go over the end of a page, to be read by MPDF. So the upshot of that is that you will have the PDF that looks as good as if it was made by a human, with the necessary skills. Because of course humans don't always get it right either, but we're trying to achieve the same quality that you would go to a book designer for.
And what kinds of styling flexibility do I have about, say, what a table looks like, and if the tables are numbered in sequence and stuff? Because a lot of publishing systems have to have all this because they want to match some house style. So how flexible is this to match a given house style?
Well, it's all CSS3. So anything you can do in a web style layout, you can do on the page using the CSS paged media specification that I mentioned earlier. So, for example, you can define several different types of page using @page, which is sort of like @font face, but it's for this page media. And then you can say, okay, this page has margins so big, and it has this special feature, and it has this kind of background, and so on. And then you can switch in your output between different @page rules by using things like divs. So you say, okay, when I reach this div in the HTML source, switch to this @page. And that's how we, set up complex book layouts with different styles. So, you can have separated pages, title pages, front matter, all those kind of things, and they all have their own styles. So, and then you've got all the usual inline styling, font face type rules, but only we copy all the fonts to the server, so we don't fetch them remotely because MPDF doesn't support that. So you basically install the fonts that you want on the server. You set up a configuration file that says, okay, for this particular name, that relates to this particular TrueType file. And then you can use them in CSS like you would in any web page. So that seems to work pretty well.
How about cross-referencing support, like individual chapters being able to be called out by something else in another chapter, and table of contents and index support? What kind of support do you have for that?
Yeah. So that in PDF, that comes from MPDF. And what you can do is, there's a couple of different ways, but one way we use it is that you say, okay, every H element, like a H1, a H2, a H3, and so on, will be in my table of contents hierarchy. And then MPDF picks out all of the H1s and H2s and H3s that it finds, and it will nest them in an automatically generated table of contents. That's one way to do it. Another way is you can set explicit anchors. So you can say, okay, at this particular point in the book, I want an anchor called this, and that will show up in the table of contents. And the same for PDF bookmarks. So if you have a screen PDF and you have the sidebar, you'll be familiar with from Adobe Reader or Events, you can click and jump to a certain place in the book, which obviously for a screen PDF is a lot more interactive than just having a conventional table of contents.
Now, I kind of spoke at the beginning of the show about generating XHTML. Is this something I could just drop on a web page then with the right styling for it?
Yeah, and Booktype is configurable to actually make each book chapter available as a web page. So depending on how private your book is or how open access it is, you do have the option to have a sort of a reader view, and depending on the permissions that you set up, you can actually have people read books directly on the Booktype server itself as a destination. So let's say they go to your Booktype instance, served by your web server, and instead of logging in, they'll just say, oh, here are the latest books. I'll click on this one. I want to read that, and just read it as a series of web pages. So you don't actually have to export it from Booktype for people to be able to read it. It just really depends on your model. I mean, some of our users don't want anybody to see their book until it's ready. Others want the people to read the book from the very earliest draft to get feedback, right? So depending on your model, you can do things different ways.
Okay, so asking, speaking about exporting, actually, would there be an easy way to export? Let's say I'm working on a book right now, and our server, for some reason, is starting to fail, but I don't want to go through the whole install, of Booktype again. Would there be an easy way to export something to like ODF or even Word format?
Yeah, we don't actually export to Word format. What we do is we ingest Word format and we turn it into something a bit easier to work with. Because if you've ever taken like a Word XML file apart, it's not fun to read, right? So we actually try and make the markup as clean as possible, so that if you do have to make any kind of manual interventions or you want to convert it into a different format, it's easier to do that. And we actually spend a lot of our time on import filters and just discarding a lot of the stuff that Word puts into files that you don't really need. So the markup is actually quite easy to read on the eye once it's imported into Booktype. And yeah, I mean, in theory, you could write it back out to a docx file, but nobody ever asks for that because it tends to be earlier in the chain that people are working in Word, right? We're at the stage where people are putting the book together and publishing it. So they don't usually want a Word document as an output. But yeah, I mean, we have an open source library that was written by a lead developer, which converts the Office Open XML into HTML. And that's up on our github.com/booktype as well. That's a project in its own right as a library. And we have another one for writing out reading and writing EPUBs as well. So, developers can use some of the components of Booktype even if they're not, using Booktype itself.
Okay. Oh, we have a question from the chat room. The Gem Doctor, I guess he wouldn't be a medical doctor, would he? Does Booktype help with making glossaries or reference tables?
You can tag stuff for indexes and so on, but this is not something that we've worked on very much to date. I mean, if you were to have something in the interface where you could highlight a word and then it could be picked up in the output stage and something like a glossary generated, yeah, it's definitely possible. And MPDF, for example, does have some support for automatic index generation. We haven't actually done much work on that because it's not something our users are really doing. Because, for example, if you're producing a screen PDF, it's often quicker just to go to the sidebar and click on the thing that you want, because you can have a hierarchy in the sidebar of H1, H2, and H3 elements. So you can drill down through that hierarchy and find what you want fairly quickly that way. But yeah, I mean, automatic indexing is something that we're definitely interested in.
Great. Hey, we're almost out of time, but one of the things I think we really haven't covered yet is who's using this. I know you mentioned a couple of names, but are there any big customers of this?
Well, probably the best known one is Amnesty International, which is a well-known NGO. It has about 7 million members around the world. And we produce their annual report using Booktype. So if you can imagine, it's got about 169 chapters, each written by a different team. And it has to be completely accurate because people's lives literally depend on the content of that book in some cases, depending on what Amnesty International writes about them and what's happening in their country. So the demand for accuracy is absolutely paramount. And then once it has to be, updated right up to publication time, then it has to be published in multiple languages. We produce Arabic, French and Spanish, as well as English, simultaneously. And we also have just recently added Chinese export, which has been a lot of fun with fonts because, I don't read Chinese, but we've made good progress and we've actually got Chinese output working now. So yeah, that's probably the best known user, but there are others. I mean, Books on Demand is quite a well-known in Europe company that produces books for self-publishers. So, you can get your book printed and mailed back to you, that kind of thing. And, there are universities and various other users and that you can see on our website.
Nice and cool. And what's the ramp-up time for someone who knows how to type, obviously, but this is their first, content generation system that they've ever approached. Is there a lot of knowledge of HTML that's needed there, or is this all mostly WYSIWYG? So I can just say put some bullet lists there.
Yeah, Aloha is very WYSIWYG. So, I mean, if you've used any other kind of inline editor where you type directly in the page, that'll be quite familiar. It's also quite easy to use for people who are used to Word, but it's simpler. I mean, there are less buttons. We make that deliberately simple, and we even have like a sort of Zen mode where you can clear all of the buttons out of the way and just type directly into an empty page if you want. So.
Good. So that'd be handy, especially like in Amnesty International, where we have a lot of volunteers probably helping put the reports together.
They have pretty big teams.
Sorry. Yeah, great.
Yeah, they have,
okay, sorry, I keep interrupting you because we have the 2-second Skype delay. We're almost out of time. Is there anything we didn't ask that you really like our audience to know about?
Well, I would say if you want to have a quick try on Booktype without having to install it on your own server, we have a server called omnibook.pro. Which you can go to and sign up for a free account. And that is a sort of just a general purpose Booktype instance. And you can have a look around and, make a book and publish it out to PDF or EPUB or whatever you want. So that's probably the easiest route into trying Booktype yourself.
Great. Well, I also have to ask 2 more questions, or my audience yells at me. They really do, actually. Well, they don't yell literally because I can't hear them, but they do give me an email with capital letters. And that is, what's your favorite scripting language? I don't know.
Shell.
Okay, well, that'll work. I thought you were going to say Python, but okay. And what's your favorite text editor?
I'd have to say Nano.
Nano, cool. Closer to Emacs and to VI. So yes, I appreciate that. I'm an Emacs guy myself, so been around that for a very long time. Well, Daniel James, it's been great having you on the show. This is probably fitting the niche for probably at least dozens of the people that listen to the show. So I think you'll probably get a lot more interaction, at least from our team. So I appreciate you coming on and talking about Booktype.
Oh, thank you very much.
Very cool. That was Daniel James, one of the main consultants or at least a consultant and contributor to Booktype, talking to us about that Booktype project. What do you think, Guillermo?
It does seem feature field. I do like the interface too, so I may be playing around with it a little bit more as I get around to actually writing my book.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the famous, like the book I have inside me, but just hasn't gotten written yet.
Yeah, exactly.
But it sounds like if you've got this sort of universal system, it's probably better than writing it in any kind of proprietary system, at least. But I've tried making stuff with OpenDoc, and it just never left me with a pleasant experience. So even as much as I want to use open source software for everything, I sometimes have to fall back to things that I'm much more familiar with. So yeah, this is great. I think it was good, right time to bring him on. Anything more before we move on?
No, I think we're ready.
Okay, great. So let's talk about upcoming guests. That's my awkward transition for the week. Actually, they haven't been very awkward these days. So I just read the next line on my outline here, which says upcoming guests. Booktype is not upcoming. That's gone now. Oops. Get rid of something. Next week we have Open Unison, which is identity management. We just added to the schedule Apache LibCloud. We had them on, it must have been like 3 years ago. And it's basically a uniform interface to all the different disparate cloud interfaces. There's so many of those that kind of all came out at the same time, cloud this, cloud that, and they had inconsistent interfaces. A lot of them tried to look like AWS, but that wasn't completely across the board either because OpenStack came out and a couple other ones came out. So LibCloud is an Apache project that's meant to sort of put a uniform interface across all of them. And they contacted me and said, by the way, we're releasing a whole new release that is really a time to update it so you can hear what it's about. So they're now on the schedule. I think it's February 2nd. And then OpenCloud Astara is also coming up, and that's an OpenStack multi-launch manager. That should be fun. Cloudy cloud stuff coming up again. I guess our springtime is always about clouds. It's been pretty consistent the last couple of years. And finally on the schedule, the only current things on the schedule anyway, is OpenAV Productions, which is a musical synthesizer and performance synthesizer, and also a music editor system, which should be quite fun. I still have a few more slots in Q1. If you go to twit.tv/floss, which is the homepage for this show, you will see how I'm getting things done. I just sent out about a dozen pieces of email, so I'm waiting for the response on all those. If there's a project that is not on that list and you want to get them on the show, 95% of the projects that we've done in the last 5 or 6 years are in fact driven by y'all, the audience. So if you want a project on, don't email me the name of the project. Instead, you find the contact information for the project leader or community coordinator, and you email them and tell them how much you enjoy Floss Weekly and how cool it's been. And they should email me, Merlin@stunthenge.com. That is listed there on the front page for Twit's show page for Floss. Let's see, we have a live stream, which I took a couple questions from today at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesdays at live.twit.tv. You can follow us at Floss Weekly on Google+, and that automatically retweets to Floss Weekly, all one word, on Twitter. You can follow me at Randall L. Schwartz on Google+, and that retweets automatically to Merlin, Merlyn, and also to my Facebook page. So you can see me all sorts of places. My Facebook page is facebook.com/Merlin. So it's really easy to figure that out. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I just got back from the cruise. I'm going to get a lot of envy from people now, because especially for those of us that were in the U.S. during that period of time, because I had 80-degree Fahrenheit weather and sunny in nearly every port. And when I had to come back to the rain in Fort Lauderdale and the rain in Portland, it was like, oh, can I go back? Can I just, re-swipe my card key and see if I can go back? No, apparently I can't. This was also a record for me. I made it to my 55th country that I've been to in the world. Colombia, that was one of the ports. So Cartagena, Colombia. So that was good. Also, I didn't realize I was going to get this, but I earned my 500-day medallion. I've got the 100-day and 300-day, and I thought I was still 300, but apparently I was 500. Got my picture taken with the captain and the hotel captain. The only thing I want to plug is that I'm speaking at scale. I'm flying out tomorrow to go to Pasadena, which is the new location for that. If you still haven't registered for that and are in the area and still want to get a discount, I believe he's still accepting the FLOSS discount. So when you go to the page where it says discount code, it would be FLOSS, FLOSS, just like the name of the show. And I have no other plugs right now because I'm not going to be anywhere public for a little while. Hoping to get to DragonCon this year. I just wrote my application yesterday, but that'll be fun for people in Atlanta to come see me there. And if you're at scale, please come up and say hi. If you see projects there that you want on Floss Weekly, contact them, whoever's the speakers, and say, we want you on Floss Weekly. Can you give us the name of the person who would be responsible to be writing Randall for that? Any plugs for you, Guillermo?
I guess people can follow me on Twitter. That's at GAMARAL. And I also do a lot of YouTube videos with electronics and stuff like that, video games. So if you can just Google me. There's another Gamral on YouTube, which is not me. He's a DJ, but I'll take credit for his music. That's fine. And what else? I'll also be at Scale. So if you are there, I will be emceeing the embedded track. So I arrive Friday morning, and I'll be there for the rest of the event. So you can also come talk to me if you want, but bring beer.
Okay, and Guillermo, thanks for jumping in twice in a row. I really appreciate that, and hope to see you at Scale. Definitely see you at Scale. How could we not end up at the same bar? I mean, really, there's no option on that. So, yeah. Thank you again for taking care of the other end of this show. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man, no problem. Anytime.
And I'll probably see you in 2 weeks down south if I can finally coordinate with you there. So,
we'll make it happen. Don't worry.
And now I normally end this show with some sort of upbeat announcement like see you next week on Floss Weekly, but I have a much more serious matter that I need to bring up because it's with a sad heart that I must say that my younger brother passed away in hospice over this weekend. He's been fighting bladder cancer for 4 months, and he was in serious pain. And when he passed away Saturday, he had his mom's hands and just stopped breathing. And so I'm dedicating this show to my brother, Russell Shady Fox Schwartz. And that was the image, if you're seeing the video, that was the image out his hospice window for the final 17 days of his life. Bladder cancer is not a good way to go. Any cancer is a bad way to go, but he lived a rich and full life. He was Shady Fox in Second Life and had thousands of friends there, though. And I've been liaisoning with them to kind of lead up what's happening the last 4 years, or last 4 months, sorry. I keep getting that scale wrong, but 53 years old, 1 year younger than me. It's not fair. So, brother, rest in peace.